Amazing. My wife is here. I have two grandchildren here. I have a son and his wife here. I have three siblings and some great first cousins once removed and friends and other cousins. How removed are we? 2 times or something. Anyway, it's an honor to stand in this place at this time. I'm particularly pleased to know that the previous speaker is the son of someone whom I have known about for a long time. His dad wrote this book. If you don't have it, you need it. Probably prettier now. I see you have better covers. This is the version of the autobiography that I have, thankfully compiled by Joseph Grant Stevenson. Which child are you?
I'm the second child.
Oh, hallelujah. Great. And this is the first version of the Reminiscences. Rich stuff. We ought to be very pleased to be related to the Stevensons. Thanks, Chris, for that. Aaron, I don't know the last time I heard Ezra Thompson's testimony in a more animated, passionate, feeling way. Thank you. And of course, it's always an honor to be on the program with Richard.
You get the best, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm a technical wizard. I'm just a little bit worse on most of the Sunday school classes we go to, where I have to fiddle with the machine for 10 minutes before it works. Come stand. I've been asked to talk about the relationship between the Stevenson and Clark families. I have chosen to do that by showing a parallel timeline, not as factually and feeling rich as Chris's presentation, but more of a timeline that shows the parallel journeys they took before they finally got together in 1845. Okay, well, I just did that, but
Do your index finger.
I'm going to. Okay, great. I call this a fruitful relationship, and I don't know the numbers that would be represented by that, but it's probably in the thousands. 4,500 miles apart, let's go to the year 1820. In the year 1820, the Stevenson family is in the colony of Gibraltar, as has been explained. That is 2 years after the Clark family moved from southern Indiana to southeastern Illinois. It is in this place that, well, first the key on my timeline. The shared dates will be in blue, the Clark dates will be in gold, and the Stevenson dates will be in yellow. The blue to show when Ezra was born is 1823 in Lawrence County, Illinois. 2 years later, Mary is born in the College of Gibraltar in 1825. 1828, you can read these things faster than I can say them. But my point is, you'll see them coming together. The Stevensons left Gibraltar, arrived in New York in July of 1828, spent a few months in Brooklyn, I'm not sure how long, but soon thereafter they moved up to Albany, New York, where they spent the time that Chris has talked about. In 1828, Timothy Baldwin Clark has moved to central Illinois, just across the river from Peoria, if any of you are familiar with that area, or Pekin. In 1830, lots of things happened that we know about in the Clark family history. Timothy moved his family to northern Illinois. In 1831, the Stevensons moved to Detroit, or was it 1832, Chris? 31? Depends.
31.
Okay. Now they're 305 miles apart. It's a little different than 4,500. By various means, they have come closer together than they've ever been before. I think Edward mentions in one of his writings that they traversed the state of New York via the Erie Canal, which had been completed in 1825, so they could do that. 1832, you can read this, Joseph died. In 1833, Timothy moved. He'd already moved to northern Illinois. He moved a little farther north into Page Township of Will County. In that same year, Edward Stevenson was baptized in Pontiac. He was one of the first members of that branch, wasn't he, after Samuel Bent? 1834, the prophet brings his father and his brother and the three witnesses to Pontiac to see Uncle Solomon, number one, probably, and then visit the saints who would become members of the church in Pontiac Branch. Edward, of course, was there as a young man and heard the testimonies of the prophet. And I wish we had time to discuss Fox's Book of Martyrs for this, but it's a very interesting story. I posted a copy of the story on the familychurch.org under Elizabeth Stevenson, if you want to read about it. But a very interesting story about how the prophet borrowed Elizabeth's copy of Fox's Book of Martyrs, which is a chronicle of all the martyrs for Christ, starting with Stephen, when he was stoned by Paul and others, up to about 1550 in England, when people were being burned at the stake because of their testimony of the Savior. Anyway, very interesting story, big, huge sideline right now. But anyway, as a result of this testimony and this experience, Edward decides, I want to be with the saints in Zion. We're going to build a temple there, whatever we're going to do. So at the age of 14, early in the year of 1834, Edward Stevenson leaves Pontiac, leaves his mother and sisters and brothers behind, and by some means, I don't remember how he got there, he went to Clay County, Missouri. In the September of 1835, Timothy moved his family, having been baptized earlier that year by Charles C. Rich. If you wonder why Charles Rich's name appears in Clark history, Charles C. Rich baptized Timothy in May of 1835 in DuPage Township in northern Illinois. That September, they choose to move to Missouri, and they go to Clay County to be near his son-in-law, John Cooper, and be near the other son-in-law, Morris Phelps, and Clark. So now, they're both, at least Edward is, the Stevenson foothold in Missouri now is about 14 miles away from where the Clark's foothold in Missouri was, in Excelsior Springs. So, we go through the persecution in Missouri, and that happens, and of course you probably know Polly died there in February of 1839. And then after the temple experience of the apostles coming back for the evening of April 25th, soon thereafter the Clarks moved to Quincy. I don't know when the Stevensons did. Do you know, Chris?
I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, spring of 1839. And so they both moved, as most of the saints did, back to Quincy, Illinois, and had refuge there for a while. Oops, I got things out of order, don't I? Oh, well. Mentioned Ezra was baptized in 1836. Mary was baptized in 1838 by David Patton. I mixed things up here. I'm sorry about that. Edward Stevenson reported in one of his writings in 1838, these should be in reverse order, of how the Clark farm was plundered by the mob. And one of the things they did is they stole a whole wagon load of turnips. I don't know of anything less savory than a wagon load of turnips, but somebody wanted them. Maybe a wagon load of parsnips, or rutabagas, onions. Anyway, Brussels sprouts. So I don't know where they live in Far West. I know where the Clarks live, but there's some interaction here and contact between the Clarks and the Stevensons as early as Caldwell County, Missouri. And then in 1839 they go to Quincy and eventually move out. But in the meantime, they're probably 1 or 3 miles apart. In 1839 they moved to the Iowa Territory. Mary talks about living in Clarksville. They were neighbors. I don't know whether they were next door neighbors or across the street neighbors or across the field, but they were closely associated, so that in 1839, Elizabeth Stevenson can care for the children of Laura, Clark, Phelps, and Morris while she goes down to Columbia, Missouri to rescue her husband from prison. And you may like to read about that episode because one of the prisoners was Parley Pratt. And he wrote quite extensively about that rescue and how Laura was protected and they all were able to escape. Partly because of her intervention with her younger brother, John Wesley Clark, going down there to help them in July. And during that time, the Stevensons were there helping the Phelps children. Edward later reports that he worked with Clarks while his mother worked in the family, in the Clark family. Timothy had no wife, living wife. Elizabeth had no living husband. I don't know what the relationship was. I'm sure it was friendly, obviously, because they helped work with each other to survive after surviving Missouri. Mary mentions in her autobiography how they enjoyed often going to Nauvoo. They lived about 6 or 7 miles from the river, so it was nice that the Clarks had a good supply of animals. I'm assuming some of them were horses. It's interesting to read this time period because Ezra T. Clark and Nathan T. Porter and Edward Stevenson often are found together doing things, socially and working. They often would go, they rode across the river just to hear the prophet speak in the grove. Now at that time, the Mississippi River wasn't as wide as it is now, thanks to the Keokuk Dam. But still, it's quite an effort for young teenage boys to go through it. 1844, of course, is a milestone in church history that they experienced deeply, and Mary reports quite well in her autobiography. Things being what they were and people living near each other, I guess, helped lead to the fact that the Stevenson-Clark relationship officially began May 18th, 1845. Ezra and Mary were married by the authority, I'm not sure, but certainly by church authority, by Ezra's older brother, William O. Clark, who himself would be an interesting lecturer too, a very interesting character. Spent most of his life as a Grand Templar in the temperance movement and traveled the world in that cause. Notice that within about a month or two earlier than that, Edward and Nancy were married. And look who shows up as having performed the ceremony. So in the Clark and Stevenson family both, Charles C. Rich is a rather important figure. The further interest is that they moved from Iowa to winter quarters in the same company. So they're friends, they know each other well. We've talked about Ezra James. Now this, by now, you see the 1868 date. By now they're settled in Utah and things are going well. The first son born to Ezra and Mary, returning from his mission in England, died in Fonda, New York, of exhaustion. It was the middle of the summer, July. If you've ever been in New York in July, it's hot and humid, especially humid to me. It's a killer. Ezra James expired in the middle of a train ride with saints from England on the way to Salt Lake. He was buried nearby somehow, and the news later came out from family, and not until the next year did Ezra T. go retrieve the body of his oldest son, who accompanied him to New York. A friend, an acquaintance, a brother-in-law, Edward Stevenson. Amazing. About the time they returned is the reported experience of Nancy in the office of Brigham Young, being granted what is in the literature called temple divorce. Of course, we know that doctrinally there is no such thing, but whatever it was, it separated Nancy from Edward. I'm going to go back here. No, there. 1869, October. We buried our first son in Farmington. We've got a situation where Edward now no longer is married to Nancy. So who goes on a mission together? Ezra and Nathan and Edward go to the eastern states for on a mission. They return in 1870 in time to be called into Brigham Young's office if you're on the Clark side of history. And as I read it, Nancy was given to Ezra as the wife by Young in his office. But Chris, I think you addressed that issue quite well. Better than I've heard it, and I appreciate that. Anyway, for what that's worth, it did not change the relationship between Edward and Ezra, apparently, because they maintained contact somehow, for some reason, and still, whatever, shared feelings. Ezra's son, Hiram Don Carlos, my ancestor, was called on a mission in December of 1877, and given a companion or vice versa. Edward Stephen, Uncle Edward, is there to help him. They left Ogden, and the next day or two after being set apart, traveled. By now you'll know why Edward would go to Richmond, Missouri. He couldn't go through Des Moines because there was nobody there he knew, I guess. Went to Richmond, Missouri so he could see David Whitmer. This is one of how many times, you know how many times he visited David? 2 or 3? Okay. So here's Edward Stevenson doing his thing, bless his heart, with his young junior companion, Hiram Don Carlos Clark. They spent several days in Richmond, Missouri, talking with, interviewing, and listening to David Whitmer bear his testimony. Among other interesting things of this testimony I found in, again, Edward's writings, is that they heard David Whitmer describe what Brigham Young later reported, well, about the same time, it hadn't been. Brigham Young was dead by then. But anyway, the account of Oliver Cowdery reciting the experience of Joseph Smith, returning to Hill Cumorah and having the hill open, and being introduced to this room full of records, wagons, swords, piles of plates on the floor, and all that. I assume you've all read about that, I trust. Young Hiram was there to hear that testimony from David Whitmer. He talked about the Book of Mormon, he talked about Moroni. I mean, they were there for 2 days. They spent many hours with David Whitmer. And he unwaveringly recited the same testimony. And my young great-grandfather was able to hear it. They then went on to Tennessee, where they were assigned on their mission. They arrived in Hickman County, Tennessee by the end of the year and were able to start service in Centerville, Tennessee. Does anybody know where that is? I didn't either, I haven't looked it up. It's southwest of Nashville. Very hilly, beautiful country. If any of you know automobile history, you'll know that when General Motors wanted to build a new plant to build the Saturn, they went to about the same area of the country, southwest of Nashville. Columbia is nearby. Thank goodness for Edward and his journals. I just listed a few quotes. January 14, 1878, had an excellent meeting. 1878, Edward wrote an extensive letter to President Taylor detailing the visit with David Whitmer. My goodness, I did a lousy job editing here, Kimball. That shouldn't be 1836, it should be 1878. I love this quote. Hiram spoke quite well, but run his boat out into deep water. Does that mean he got beyond what he knew, or said something, what? Run his boat out into deep water. I don't know if that's the cause, but at some point, Hiram became ill after having served in Toddy's Bend, Poplar Union, and Columbia, and Centerville, and had to go home. But before that, he and Edward co-authored, I assume it's authored by Edward, a tract entitled, containing the first principles of the doctrines of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints by Elders Edward Stevenson and H.D.C. Clark. That's a good way to state incognito. Centerville, Tennessee, 1878. This is a delightful little pamphlet. It's 8 or 10, 12 pages long. I found it in the Church History Library. And there's my ancestor's name with his uncle on a pamphlet espousing the doctrine of Jesus Christ and Hickman County, Tennessee. The next connection I found, and Chris, thank you for showing some more from America. Ezra and Mary write a letter, and Edward reports receiving it. I don't know why he and his wife were in Sandusky, Ohio on vacation. If you live in Farmington, that isn't the first place I think of going, but I've been there. It's a nice place. There's a great copy of the lagoon there. It's about 3 or 4 times as big, but it's a good place. They're in Sandusky, Ohio, and receive a letter from Ezra and Mary, January 25th, 1887. The contact, the relationship is still alive and still positive, apparently, in spite of things that have happened on each side of the equation here. In 1888, sadly, Nancy Rita Porter Stevenson Clark passes away on a visit she made to one of her sons, who happened to live in the home county where I was born, only this was in Elba, Idaho. Ezra went up to retrieve her body, who wrote the obituary for the newspaper, her ex-husband. To me, that epitomizes what must have been the relationship here. The ex-husband writes the obituary, and the current husband, though they never lived together, retrieves the body. Speaks for itself. 1895, Ezra and Mary celebrate their 50th anniversary. Among others, President Wilford Woodruff attended. I could not find any reference in Edward's autobiography. He did. I can't imagine he did not, for all the things we've talked about. In 1897, Edward died, 2 months short of being 77. Nathan Tanner Porter died the same year, 3 months short of being 77. A couple of years later, Ezra Thompson died, 77 plus. It's interesting to me, particularly because I also am in the Senate of Works, to see the lifetime friendship, the lifetime cooperation, the lifetime discipleship that these 3 men shared. Is this the end of the Stevenson-Clark relationship? I hope not. I had one personal. Unbeknownst to Chris until he saw this, I benefited from instruction from his father as a freshman at UIU. Thank you. Which is why I probably bought this book once I found out it pertained to me. But it's been a rich experience. It's been a rich passion to love family history the way you do, apparently. I had to indulge a little bit and have some pictures. Here I am in the Library of Congress. My daughter took that picture. And where's Steve? Where's David's brother? No, the other one. Stand up. His brother took the picture when we were together in the Chicago Public Library. Just so you know, is it?
This is my brother Paul, David's brother also.
Oh, Paul, the dentist from Dayton, Ohio. My goodness. We stayed overnight with him one time. Good to see you again. Small world, isn't it? You're Clark or Stevenson or Porter. That's almost the end of my presentation. I love this stuff, and I love all of you that care about it. It's really important, and I echo in a second what Richard Lambert talked about. I don't know about you and what your emotional makeup is, and I barely understand mine sometimes. But I do know one thing, that when I go to a place of importance, it means more than reading about it, seeing a video about it, hearing a testimony about it, or anything, a picture of it, anything. It never replicates being there. And I hope that if you haven't yet chosen to do so, that you will come with us and be there in Milford, Connecticut, and in Farmington, Connecticut, and in Bridgewater, Connecticut, and Brookfield, and Harmony, Pennsylvania, and Palmyra, and Vienna, Ohio, where Timothy's parents are here, and some of his siblings, etc. It would be a great time. And speaking of history, my wife and I had the privilege of serving a mission for a year in the Boston area. One of the things we did during that service was spend one day a week in Plymouth, Massachusetts at the Mayflower Society, working with some records preservation missionaries that the church assigned there in preparation for a significant historical event next year. I just thought of today, Richard, when you were talking. Pilgrims 400 years ago, first vision 200 years ago, in 1820. I'm wearing a shirt for the Mayflower Society, celebrating 400 years of the Pilgrims arriving in America. Now, I don't know how many of you have had the experience of being in a city celebrating 400 years of founding. I have. On my mission in Brazil, I happened to be living in the city of Rio de Janeiro, 1964, as they celebrated 400 years of founding. That's an incredible feeling. If you grow up in Burley, Idaho, which was 70 years old when I was born, 70, 400, whoops. It's a different feeling. 400 years, and being in Plymouth, seeing Plymouth Rock, being there around, we discovered during our mission service that one of the old cemeteries we were driving by all the time had a lot of our ancestors buried there. That's an interesting feeling, to have that opportunity to be there and to touch it. I encourage you to consider looking into becoming an official Mayflower descendant, registered with the Mayflower Society, which you can do. It'll be easy to do. If you're a descendant of Sanford Porter, a lot of that work has been done, so you just have to prove a connection with him. And if you're a descendant of William Henry Dewell, who helped settle Centerville, that work has been done, so you just have to connect with him. You become an official member of the Mayflower Society. It's a very interesting experience. Thank you for your time. Any questions about any of this, about the tour, about the history, anything? Please.
We're from Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, well, no, wait, are you?
We're
Paul?
from Judy, Paul's wife.
What's your daughter doing?
And my middle name's Hickman, Judy Hickman Clark, and my family came from Tennessee. It was a long time ago. The Hickman line, but I married Clark. Anyway, we would love to join the tour. We've been to most everything for the last 40 years. So is there anything, are you allowed to join the tour at places that you haven't been if we're driving up there?
I hope so.
And we would, we compensate who was ever.
Where are you living now?
During the day. We have retired to Provo, Utah.
Okay.
So it would be going back east again, but we have tons of family back there. And we, so we don't need to stay exactly the tour, but we would love to do so many of the things we haven't been able to do.
I can't imagine why not, Richard, can you?
But I
No.
think we'd
And
compensate.
we're going to go to Wilson Woodruff's birthplace, see that.
Yep.
We're going to go to the cemetery where Robert Mason is buried, who had the vision of the restoration of the gospel and knew would participate. Told that story with young Wilford and part of our church history. Yeah.
Well, I'll talk to you after.
Great.
Because it's a glorious trip, we can tell that. So we'll see.
Well, thank you. Anybody else? Any? Richard, comments? No? Anybody? Okay. Thanks for your attention. Are you coming up to comment? Oh, that's great. You're going to have to tell us who you are.
My name is Nate Anderson. I'm tied in with Carolyn, daughter of Owen. And the reason why I wanted to come up here, yes, the reason why I wanted to say this is we do have something in common. It was very interesting to hear the comments about Edward Stevenson. Had not been for Edward Stevenson, Martin Harris would never have been back to the church, period. And of course, B.H. Roberts makes a very good argument on that in the church history. My grandfather, I'm 90 years old, and so that gives me the,
Start acting great.
yeah. So I did know original pioneers as a young man. One of those original pioneers was my grandfather. He settled up, they came a little bit before the railroad finished, so they were original pioneers. He settled up in Smithfield, and when he got there, he had an Aaronic priesthood person. His name was Martin Harris Jr. So when Martin Harris came back to Utah, Martin Harris Jr. asked Martin Harris, his father, to bear his testimony to his Aaronic priesthood group. So every time someone shakes my hand, they're shaking the hand that shook the hand of Martin Harris. Good to be with you.
Now he's got me thinking about other stuff. As a young missionary sitting in the Salt Lake Temple during my week of preparation, an old man sat by me, maybe he was 90 or more. Among other things, he pointed out to me in the paintings in the world room that if you look just right, you can see Moses' face and his beard in the water, and all this stuff. Importantly, though, he told me, as a child, I attended the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple. So that's my reach back to the past, 1893, and I'm sitting there in 1963. If you're a Mayflower descendant of Sanford Porter William Dooley, you're related to George Soule,